I thought there was one more person ahead of me. I had a Philly cheesesteak sandwich in my mouth. But not anymore. No, somebody gave me a piece of it, and I had to give the rest of my piece away to somebody else. It's okay because I love you guys more. That's why I've had more to drink since the last time you saw me, because I'm going to be funnier. Alright, so where we last left off, I was going to the psych ward. This is what drinking gets you. So now I'm in psych ward. The way psych ward is set up is that there are 4 big rooms with no windows, and they shove every psych inmate into one of these rooms. When I was brought to my first room, there were about 30 other people in it. By the way, there are no beds. We're all laying on concrete or sitting if there wasn't enough room to lay down. I was scared out of my mind. And I was in a room full of psych ward patients with no way to defend myself if things went south. Excuse me. I found a corner to sit in and just tried to stay awake. But sleep called to me, and I found myself curling into a ball and closing my eyes. I don't know how much time had passed, but I was shaken from my sleep by a deep voice that said, "What are you doing sleeping here, pretty boy?" I looked up to see that a very muscular man had put his hands on the wall above me and was standing just so that I would not be able to get away from him. This was it. This was where Connor Clifton was going to have to give away what he promised to save for marriage. Then I saw his badge. "Aren't you a cop?" He immediately started laughing and said, "Ha ha ha! Wake the fuck up, punk! Watch your ass!" And just walked out of the room. Asshole. The other inmates began cracking up, saying stuff like, "This fucking white boy thought he was gonna get raped! Ha 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 ha!" Yeah, real fucking funny. Eventually, a guard came and called a few names. Mine was one of them. There were 5 of us who all went to get our blood pressure checked. The other 4 inmates went back to their big holding cells. And as I walked to mine, a guard said, "Not that one. This one," pointing to a different room. I walked in and saw that it was completely empty. I immediately ran to the toilet and grabbed the toilet paper. I had been saving my meals for a few reasons. Trades. Easy ways to tell you how many 6-hour increments had passed. They were fucking gross, etc. But I learned a trick during my last visit to the joint. I took the toilet paper and quickly wrapped my food with it, making quite an effective pillow. I stuffed the rest of the toilet paper in my pants. This was going to be a valuable resource, and I wanted to make sure it was all mine. Right after I stuffed my pants, the door to my room opened and one other inmate was brought in. He was a ragged-looking old man who was blind in one eye. He was missing several teeth and didn't say a word. He just sat down and stared ahead. I didn't know what to say, if anything. And suddenly I heard a man crying outside the room, and the half-blind man shouted, "Shut the fuck up, bitch! You did the crime! Do your fucking time!" Okay, yeah, I wasn't going to say anything to this guy. He went back to being stoic, and after a while, he leaned to the side and let out a massive fart. This guy was definitely asserting his dominance. We were the only 2 people in that room for a while, and eventually the door opened again, and several inmates came in. I saw a few who shared my outward appearance. Look, this shit matters in jail, okay? And moved towards them, hoping to use my toilet paper if they didn't immediately accept me. There were 3 of them. Wheels. he had a wheelchair. Looker, he just stared. And my personal favorite, Rusty Dildo. Dildo was a big dude and a freelance writer for marijuana blogs across America. We talked about Nietzsche and the state of modern journalism. We both knew we would only be friends in these walls, but we were happy to have someone we could actually talk to. In order to protect this guy's identity, I can't tell you the origin of his nickname. Wheels had borrowed the wheelchair from a guy who actually needed it but preferred to lie down. So they'd switch back during roll call. Wheels had woken up in psych ward after a night of heavy drinking. He was covered in bruises from what clearly was a brutal ass-kicking. His money was on the cops. The worst part of his predicament was that he couldn't call his family or his lawyer because all the phones in psych are routinely destroyed by actual psychos. I asked him what he meant by actual psychos, and he explained that the health screening section of the psych ward is the best place to be. It's all people who just need medicine, and there's maybe one actually disturbed person for every eight inmates. God damn it. 8 inmates. Go fuck myself, right? One actually disturbed person for every 8 inmates. The other 7 were just lucky. I remember thinking that if no contact with the outside world is considered lucky, then I never want to go into general population or Gen Pop. Looker, as I said, just stared. I saw he had a copy of the New Testament, and I asked if I could borrow it for a bit. He said yes, but don't lose his place. Whenever Wheels and Rusty Dildo would take a nap, I would read a few verses of this book that had failed me countless times before. Some people saw me, and one inmate said, "Look at Grandpa over here, reading and shit." And that was that. I was Grandpa. I had a jail name, and it was fucking Grandpa. By this time, I had 4 sandwiches to my name. Normally, I'd be able to use the amount of food I had to tell how much time had passed, but I had slept through a few meals, and no one bothers to wake you up or see if you've passed out from starvation. So who knows what time it was. Whenever the door to our room would open, someone would run to the corner and shout the time, but we didn't know if it was AM or PM. We all just had to take a guess or ask a newcomer. If they had seen any sunlight on the way to the psych. Suddenly, the door opened. Someone ran to the corner and shouted, 1018! The guard who opened the door had a clipboard in his hand and read off 6 names. Mine was one of them. I was worried that I was going to have to leave the psych ward and go back to the Gen Pop. But the officer told me, "You're going ATW. All the way home." Which, now that I'm reading this, why wasn't there an H? All the way, ATW. Anyway, the half-blind man was also one of the 6. I've never been to jail. I don't know this shit. We then walked to solitary to pick up 2 more inmates, and then we were all placed into a big room together. Just 8 inmates, shooting the shit and talking about what we do once we got out. I looked over to the half-blind man and noticed he had a pen. I worked up the courage to ask him if I could use it, and he said, "Keep it. I don't want anything from this fucking place." Once I had it in my hand, I realized it was just the thin plastic ink reservoir, part of a normal ballpoint pen that he had wrapped in soap and shampoo labels over the course of 6 months until it was the size of a normal pen so he could hold it. I typically buy fancy pens with nice grips for my delicate little fingers, but this guy likely went through a lot of blisters and cramps before his pen got to his current size. I said thank you, and started writing my thoughts on the rest of my toilet paper. It was no letter from Birmingham jail, but I thought it was pretty good. Just enough notes to help me write this story several months later. God damn it. Not too long after I started writing, the door to our cell opened up and we were taken to a changing room and given back our clothes. We changed and were brought to processing. And after about 20 minutes of sitting around and processing, we were released. My first time in jail, I learned what true shame and fear felt like. I had let everyone down, and my professional and romantic life suffered because of it. But sobriety taught me a great deal about myself and what I was capable of. My second time in jail was a little different. Instead of thinking about how ashamed I was, I kept thinking about my friends and family and how so many people I know have been widely supported by driving me around or just listening to me vent, even though they're too polite to admit that I'm inconveniencing them. For that, I am incredibly grateful. Not everyone is lucky enough to have the support group that I had, and I don't have time to name them all, but they know who they are. I also realized that if I ever had to go to jail for a third time, God forbid, I'll have instant respect from everyone in there. Because I'm motherfucking grandpa.